Yes, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Rugby Muscle podcast. Back again with the Rugby Muscle Applied series, and today we are running through Rugby Programming 102. So we've done 101, where we've referred to how you're training overall for rugby, how you should create a program, a long-term program that will improve you as a rugby player. Now we're going to look at how you should be organizing your training week, and this is a little bit of response to common questions that I get from the Rugby Muscle Athletes Facebook page. But more often than not, it's something that is very easily answered if you apply the frameworks that we'll go through in today's video/podcast. As usual, thumbs up, comments below, please help a boy out. 5-star reviews, as always, on the podcast also really do help out. So without further ado, let's get into this. So for the weekly training program, we're looking at how to set out the perfect training week for you to ensure maximum progress. We're not just looking at, one perfect week. We're looking at how you can continue to make progress week on week on week. But how would that look? How would 1 week within that look like? And it's a question I get asked a lot, and you'll see why in a second. You'll see right now. Because I always get asked about training splits, and unless we're talking about this kind of training splits, I don't really want to be talking about it. It's such a non-starter conversation and thing that we want to, waste of time, waste of mental focus that I have to understand. What people have to wrap their head around is that, and I think this is something that comes from, the bodybuilding culture and the fitness magazines, where we're looking at different training splits, push, pull, legs versus upper, lower versus whatever, training chest and biceps together versus chest and triceps together. And it's such a mute point, but it's something that you can almost discuss ad nauseum, which then is good for someone that wants to consistently get you clicking on their website or consistently selling you magazines. However, what you do is far more important than when you do it. Training splits are just a way, your traditional training splits, not what this guy is doing, are the traditional way just to divide up load, stimulus, fatigue, and recovery. So, there are so many different ways you can do that. It doesn't really matter how you do that. That's not going to really dictate the success of your program. What's going to dictate the success of your program, number one, is what you do when you're training. And then the other thing is, what's going to be the biggest threat to any training week? Is it going to be that your first week isn't perfect, or is it going to be that your weeks never come together, they never synchronize, they never compound week on week on week on week? Is it the first one where you just don't have a perfect week, or especially week one, it's not perfect, or is it you don't consistently apply the same weeks in a systematic manner to continue to make progress? I'd wager that it's the biggest threat is that it's that second one. So with that in mind, before we even look at how our training week needs to look like, we should be looking at how our actual week looks like in general. A lot of people don't even take this into consideration, but this is by far the most important factor when it comes to organizing your training throughout the week is, what are you already doing? Because then you have to arrange your training around that. So if you don't know what your current work week looks like, and your current other things that you have to look at, things that will be factors in your week, things that take up time in your week, things that you have to commit to, write them down, create a schedule, update it as needed. Ideally, you look at your schedule. I do it every Sunday night. I'll go through my schedule. I'll roughly outline it on the Friday before the following week, and then Sunday I'll sit down for quite a while and I'll sort of identify exactly where I'm going to be training, or when I'm going to be training, when I'm going to be working, when I'm going to be doing all these other things that I have to do each week, recording podcasts, getting myself organized, when rugby's in season, when I've got to go commit to that, and then you form your training week around that. So really important that you have to understand what is non-negotiable, because there'll be things that you have to do. Right now, for those that are working at home, you've got maybe you've got a certain amount of hours that you've got to commit to work, or maybe you've got a certain amount of hours that you've got to commit to study. Maybe you've got a certain amount of hours that you want to commit to family time, to relationships. Those things must be done each week, otherwise, your life is going to degrade. It's really, really important that you take care of these things and that they go in your schedule first, because they have to be there. But you can be fairly loose with where you fit them in. For example, family time. Some people value their breakfast with their family more than they value, the early afternoon time. Some people would, everybody's different. If you're working from home, you can arrange your working week as well to suit you. However it is, there's different things, but those are things that are non-negotiable. Then there are times that are non-negotiable. For example, meetings. Now, even if there are optional meetings, but they're ones that you want to take, it's better off that you consider those times and you don't arrange your training for those times. You have to really, again, go about your week, figure out exactly where you're going to be committed to, and then arrange your training around the times that you're not already committed to. Arrange your training commitments around these things. So plot everything else that's more important first, arrange a training week. Then you look at, right, how many training sessions can I feasibly fit in here? If I'm being realistic, how many can I commit to? Do not fall into the trap of trying to fit in as many training sessions even when it's unrealistic, and do not fall into the trap of sacrificing sleep for these training sessions. It's absolutely fine for people to wake up at 5:30 or even 5 o'clock to get a training session in. But that doesn't mean that they go to bed at 1 or 2 a.m. That means that they go to bed at 9 or 10 p.m. And that's absolutely fine. You'd rather wake up and train that early versus training from 9 till 10 p.m. because that just interferes with your sleep. There's a lot of negatives to that. And with that in mind, I do find that whichever way you can do it, making it as a habit is going to be the easiest way. So the morning is really good because you could just wake up, go to the bathroom, have a coffee, train. That's a very easy habit that is very difficult to interfere with, and it's something that you can sort of just keep ticking that box and get into as a habit. It's just something that you do, and the more you can create something as a habit, the less it requires motivation. Likewise, you could do it. I tell a lot of people that I work with this that potentially it's better off to, when they're finishing up work at the office or wherever they are at work, you're better off to go straight to the gym than to go home, because once you go home, then you've got to use that motivation to leave the house. It's better to have that habit. As soon as I leave work, I go to train, or I go train at lunchtime. Whatever way you can create a habit where you're less reliant on motivation to get those training sessions in, the better it's going to be. Final thought on those habits is that it would also behoove you to train as consistent as possible. So even if you haven't trained in a very, very long time or consistently for a long time, you might be better off just training Monday to Friday, because that then becomes part of your daily routine. Training, even if it's 45 minutes or 30 minutes, ideally it's an hour, but you are setting that aside that time every day. Whereas if you're setting it only 3 times a week, then those 3 times you might have to rely on a little bit more motivation to get going. Whereas if you're doing it every day, then it becomes more habitual. You're also going to look at your schedule then from there and put down your ideal training schedule. So what's the minimum amount that you need? Not just however much you can train and then think, I can train 15 times a week, I'm going to make all of the gains. It doesn't work like that, right? So what's the minimum amount of need that you need to improve at the areas that you want to improve, and stay consistent? Be realistic with your time. Don't think that you're going to be able to go to the gym, have a really effective session, have a shower, drive back, and that's all going to happen within 30 minutes. And then you're also going to cook, and it's only going to take 5 minutes to cook. Be realistic with your time. Allow buffer blocks, and start with less and build out more as the weeks go on. Learn from previous attempts. And this is something that I've learned, because I would always try to just fit in so many things in my schedule that it wasn't realistic, and then every week felt like a failure, even if I got stuff done, and it completely ruined my consistency. So I then dialed it all the way back, started doing everything as the minimum as possible. That allowed me to stay more consistent, and I could build on from that. Like I've already mentioned, if you have a schedule where you're training daily, that does allow for more consistent habit creations and therefore less motivation. I think also 2 days off can be counterproductive. So I'll see a lot of people that train, Monday to Friday, and then they take Saturday and Sunday off. I like to train. I'd like to see Sunday could be completely off, and if you have to take another day, maybe take Wednesday or Thursday off, or you just go through Monday to Saturday training every day and adjusting your loads accordingly. Finally, as I've already said, don't look to shortchange yourself by only giving yourself one training session a week. Give yourself enough of a routine that you have to keep focused and you stay engaged. But also don't set yourself in that trap that I've already explained that I've done before and overwhelm yourself. It's very easy to do, and then you've done all this for no reason. So keep track of your weekly training, or keep track of your overall week, how often you're sticking to your program or how often you're sticking to your schedule. Be really realistic with it, and just be as consistent with this process as you can. So set a time aside where you can keep re-engineering the schedule until it becomes a habit, because if you've messed up, there's a reason you might have messed up, and if that's okay, it's fine, but you keep moving forward and you keep adjusting your schedule as you need until it becomes like a very, very easy habit. And then, finally, we actually start to look at what our training week should look like, what we're actually going to be doing. So, again, first and foremost, each week needs to have a primary focus. We've spoken about this on our annual planning in terms of how we would plan our blocks. Go back and watch Periodization 101 or Rugby Program 101 to understand more on that. But overall, it's so important that those things become the primary focus. Yes, you will have other focuses, but those things go in first. Those things, they get the focus of all of the primary treatment, right? So, they get as much training as you can. So whether that's most frequency, most volume, probably going to be a little bit of both, making sure that you're freshest for each time you want to improve at those things, and making sure you're making the most improvement at those things at that exact focus as possible. Then from there, you can look to see how the rest of your other focuses can be trained around it, but they are going to take second fiddle. If, for example, if your main goal is speed, it's not a good idea to do some heavy back squats the day before your speed session. Likewise, it's probably not even a good idea to do heavy back squats the day after your speed session, because that's going to interfere with your recovery from your speed session. Heavy back squats has to be done another time. But that's because we've decided that we are prioritizing the speed for this training block. Likewise, if you're doing aerobic work, you've got a lot more flexibility. You've got a lot more different ways that you can improve your aerobic work. Your aerobic work then doesn't get sacrificed by doing heavy back squats or by doing whatever movement that doesn't really interfere with your aerobic work. So you can look to prioritize that second focus a little bit more because you've got that much more room to play around with. But you're still really looking to maximize the improvement that you're doing with that primary focus. Then, once you've had, I don't think you should look at more than 3 main focuses. After that, everything else really gets put on maintenance. Now, that's not to say you don't look to improve at all, but that's not your goal. Your goal is to improve every other area, and if you happen to improve at the stuff that's on maintenance, great, but that's not the goal of this training block. The goal of the training block is to improve at the 3 things that you want to improve upon. Put the pyramid here because the higher on the pyramid, everything gets relative, but the lower on the pyramid you go, the more often you need, or the more you should be training these things, the more priority over a training year these things should get. But the stuff in the bottom also can be very good secondary and tertiary work, versus the athlete and the special prep work kind of needs to slowly become the main focus and then just drop out, right? Whereas this is always going to be secondary to, and then become maintenance. Whereas the lower on the pyramid you go, the better off that stuff can be and fit into your program as secondary and tertiary work. As usual, any questions, anything on this, you can ask in the comments below on the YouTube. Or you can give us a 5-star review on the Apple Podcasts and ask a question there. Then we're going to talk about spreading your load. Now, once you've got your mind out of the gutter, we're going to talk about how that should be done as part of your training plan. Normally, if you look at the top graph here, this is how a lot of people would like to schedule their week. They'd like to get a little bit of hard stimulus. So the light red is the high stimulus, high fatigue work. The medium red is the medium work, and then the dark red is the low work, the lesser fatiguing, lesser stimulus, lesser impact work, right? So a lot of people like to do a little bit of heavy work, then they'll go into, or a little bit of heavy, high stress, high fatiguing work, then they'll do a little bit of medium work, so maybe a little bit of strength work or sort of strength slash hypertrophy work, stuff in that 6 to 10 rep range. Then they like to do some light fluff work, maybe some and that's how a typical session is planned out. So, finishing off with some core work or some aerobic work or a finisher, and that's what they do. They do that same thing every day. Now, that unfortunately just leads to more and more and more and more fatigue being added on top of each other, on top of each other, on top of each other, and that means primarily that the high work gets less focused. So let's introduce or reintroduce, because if you've heard anything rugby muscle, you've heard me talk about this high-low sort of way of organizing your week, and it is so important because when you're training your high days, these the things that would go into your high days would be high force work, so either heavy weight or really high speed, or highly fatiguing work. Rugby training also counts because that will be highly fatiguing, not just, it might not be high force or give you a massive stimulus, but it is going to be fatiguing because of the impact. But it's also heavy strength work, speed work, power work, anything that you need to be fresh for, that will cause that you need a high amount of force for. Now, the reason this stuff is quite unique, it's very important for athletes training, because you need to be relatively fresh in order to handle the loads. But those loads also then create a lot of fatigue that you then need to have at least 2 nights sleep to recover from. So if you're just constantly training a little bit of high, you're never fully recovering, and therefore you're never working these high force areas such as strength and speed and whatnot as consistently as possible, or as high level, and therefore you're actually not working them at all, right? So for example, speed work must be done at 95% or more. If you are even slightly fatigued and can't reach that 95%, you're no longer working speed. All you're doing is creating more fatigue. Then you definitely can't get to 95% the next day, or the next day, or the next day. You need to have a full day of recovery in between. I've put here at least 2 nights sleep, because it just gives the sort of understanding that you need 1 full day in between each session. Now, you don't need to take the day off in between those sessions. You can actually work on your lower level work. So everything else, like aerobic work, low force stuff, low fatigue stuff, all this stuff can be done on your low days, because then that's still giving you that training stimulus, but allowing you to recover to then repeat those high intensity efforts on the following day. And so then from there, if you look at the high-low split, we've then organized our week. We've still got the exact same amount of training volume given to high, medium, and low, but we've divvied it out so that then when we're doing our high intensity work, we are getting the most bang for our buck. We are as fresh as possible, and then we're just doing our low and medium work on the other days to allow us to recover, to be ready for those high intensity days, and also to still get in some really quality work. It doesn't matter if we're fatigued, if we're just doing a set of curls, right? We're still able to get through it. It also doesn't matter if we're quite fatigued, if we're just doing an aerobic circuit. Those things are perfect for low days. Other thing is, like, the higher the highs, the lower the lows. So the more fatigue you have, the more lower intensity those low days have to be. Likewise, if you're doing like a bodybuilding split, right, this could still be done, but it would be the high stuff would be the lower, because you're losing more absolute weight, more absolute force. But it's not overly fatiguing. It's not going to overly disrupt your system for the other days. So that can be more a medium day. And that's as easy as you'd like to sort of organize your week, but that fits into every single part of athletes training that you can do. One thing to one more time reinforce is that those high days are the ones that you need to be fresh for. So if you have like highly fatiguing or high impact, high force, strength or speed work during the week when you're in season, it's a good idea to do that work on the same day as your rugby training days, because of the fatiguing nature of your rugby training. If you do high force, high speed work the day after your rugby training, you're going to be too fatigued and it won't be as effective, anywhere near as effective as it possibly could be. So you're better off just doing them on the same day. It seems counterintuitive, but this is by far the way that you are best able to organize your training each week. And then some examples. I've got a million here. Just take a screenshot of this for ease. If you're listening to it on the podcast, go to the YouTube channel and check out the screenshot. I've got, we've got an off season here where we are looking at high, low recovery, high, low, high, right? So therefore we've got 3 high level stimuluses, 3 low level stimulus. That recovery could also be, low to medium. Recovery is just an even lower option than low. Then we've got in season where we've got our rugby training, probably going to try and get our high intensity sessions on those rugby training days. They're also away from a game, so it gives us a little bit of recuperation before games and after games as well. We've also got 3 times a week, 4 times a week, 5 times a week, 6 times a week options here, all of which can suit you. And this is how I would frame my training. No matter what, if we're doing if we're doing legs, push, pull, you would still frame that as you would just do your heavier work on the high days. I would just still do all of your sessions pretty much as full body, and I would look at what am I trying to improve upon, not body parts. Where am I trying to improve? Where am I trying to put most of my focus? Is that high fatiguing work? If yes, put them on the high days and spread those high days out throughout the week. If they're not, make sure that I'm going to be able to do it at the next volume, but then look at what is my high intensity work. Where are they going to go? How am I going to spread that out throughout the week? And then therefore I'm going to get the most bang for my buck each and every single week. And that, in a nutshell, is how you should be organizing your training. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. As usual, thumbs up, comments below. Let me know what you thought about this video and let me know what else you would like to see from the Rugby Muscle YouTube channel or the Rugby Muscle Applied series. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you in the next one.